Most of us go through the day in 3 stages: a peak, a trough, a recovery. A peak, a trough, a recovery. Most of us go through in that order: a peak in the early in the day, trough in the middle of the day, recovery later in the day. And it turns out that, and most of us, as I said, most of us go through in that order. About the 20% of us who are night owls, all right, something called a chronotype, which is, your propensity to go to sleep early and wake up early, to go to sleep late and wake up late. People who are night owls, evening chronotypes, they're much more complicated. They often go in the reverse order, but in general, they hit their peak much, much later in the day. But here's what we know. During the peak, that's when we're highest in vigilance. Vigilance means we can bat away distractions. That makes the peak, which again, for most of us is early in the day, the best time to do analytic work that requires heads down, focus, and attention. During the trough, which for almost all of us is that early to mid-afternoon, that's a very dangerous time. We see a whole array of data on this about errors in hospitals, about hand washing in hospitals going down, about doctors writing unnecessary prescriptions during that time period, about declines in corporate performance, a rise in car accidents, reduced performance in standardized tests. I mean, that early after to mid-afternoon period, we are not at our best. We are at our worst. And so during that period, we should be doing our administrative work, answering those routine emails that I mentioned. And then finally, later in the day, it's a very interesting time. I call it the recovery. What happens is that our mood goes back up, but we're less vigilant. And that makes it a good time for things that require some degree of mental looseness. So iterating new ideas, brainstorming. In some ways, I mean, truly, like my scheduling of this particular conversation was intentional. I'm talking to you at 4 p.m. my time, all right, basically the beginning of my recovery. I didn't want to have this conversation with you at 2 p.m. Because I knew that I wasn't going to be at my best. And I knew that this, I was hoping at least that you were not going to treat this interview like an investigative reporter, that you didn't have all my tax returns and were looking for unnecessary deductions and trying to trap me in contradictions. Instead, I figured, hey, it'd be typical kind of Scott, where it's like big ideas, let's talk about what this means and how it all works. And so what we should do is, again, circling back, in our peak, analytic work. In the trough, administrative work. In the recovery, what scientists call insight work, creativity, iterative kinds of things. If you're a night owl, what's really important is that you do your analytic work late in the day. And if we do the right work at the right time, we're going to perform better and we're going to feel better, period.